The wind whistled through the trees as Bach trudged through the muddy terrain, his 2 puppies in each arm, his camera in a ripped-up bag on his back. Only 14 years old, he has learned recently that the adults had a lucrative business to get by some easy money, and all it took was uploading a few videos every few days on a video platform. The business was straightforward. Take a random animal, one more easily relatable to the people in the West who dote on their pets and would throw money at them, and pretend to save them. Well, the people watching didn't know. Bach had thought the whole thing was silly, and it's not like he would be putting his animals in real danger. After all, most of the entertainment that's online is fake anyway. He wouldn't be forcing anyone to give him money either. It would just make them feel good and show them that there are still good people out there. The truth, though, is a totally different story. Bach's parents ate dogs, and it was a normal way of life. It's the easiest food to come by, and one of the easiest foods to raise in his region. His family has been doing this for as long as anyone can remember, and he found it a bit hypocritical of the same people who cry and criticize his family and others like his family for eating dogs when they do the same or worse to cattle and other animals. He honestly didn't understand what the difference was, except that one ate plants and the other ate meat. It made no sense to him, but he had personal reasons why he didn't go out of his way to eat what many in the West cultures considered sacred. He didn't like the taste, and he was probably a bit biased in that he had owned a small puppy when he was younger. The puppy followed him anywhere he went, and when it grew up, it saved him from some bad men who had been trying to rob him of the money his parents gave him to pick up their food. He had seen how vicious his dog had become. He figured that any animal who was willing to fight that hard just to save a human is worth living. But he didn't condemn his family or village for eating dogs. Dogs, just like any animal on the earth, are good to eat. It's not like his family had much of a choice. His mother and father were also very kind to the dogs they raised, made sure they were fed well, and for the most part, killed quickly. He saw how scared the other dogs were whenever a kill didn't go as fast as expected. He saw how intelligent the dogs were. He saw how distrustful they became towards Bach's parents when they came to get another dog for dinner. He noticed how different goats and plant-eating animals would behave, as though their memories were so short they would go back to grazing, as though one of their friends hadn't gotten slaughtered mere moments ago. However, it seems the dogs would remember. Something about that bothered Bach. The puppies squirmed in his arms. He found a spot in a forest not far from his home. He placed the pups down. Cute little white pups a dog on his mother and father's property had just given birth to. One of the white pups had a little brown spot on its nose. Their eyes were still closed, and they cried out for their mother to feed them. She would not ever answer those cries. Their mother was long gone, currently being butchered for tonight's dinner. Bach's father had planned to kill the little ones as well. They didn't even realize that the dog had been pregnant, but Bach begged his dad to have these little ones. Bach's father knew that the puppies wouldn't last long without their mother, and Bach admitted he only needed them for a few days. His father had just smiled and ruffled his son's hair. His father was curious as to what his son would need with the puppies, if not for food, and when Bach told his father laughed and asked him a very important question. Don't you think that those people watching are going to notice that they're the same puppies in every video? You silly boy. They'll know that you were playing pretend and you won't get any money. People in the West are soft, and they'll cry if they think you're scamming them. You at least have to make it look believable. When Bach asked how, his father was quick with an answer. Well, you need to tell the story, but not to the same audience. Make different accounts and upload your story in a slightly different way to each of them. That way all your eggs are not in one basket. If you manage to make money, then you will keep it and I will be proud. Just don't do it at night. I'm gonna need you home before then, little man. Bach hugged his father and then went off. Bach placed the puppies in a small dugout area in the dirt that he made and made them a little bit dirty, and then set up his camera. He wouldn't even need to speak in this video, but he figured he wanted to look more legit. He had watched other animal rescue videos and how they did it. If people could see his face in this one but not another, they wouldn't be able to prove that he's the same person, and besides, what are the chances they're going to find all the accounts? Didn't matter, because he was just going to take it one at a time. Maybe he would utilize another dog. Bach filmed himself rescuing the puppies and putting them in a box and carrying them back home. He also filmed them nursing from a different mother dog who had just had her puppies killed days ago. This part of the story would be for another video, titled, Puppies Reunited with Mother. The mother dog was in a bad state. For some reason, she had not been eating even before her puppies had been taken away. Bach's parents were probably going to just butcher her regardless. For dogs like that, they would make mincemeat out of them and feed them to the other dogs since there's not enough meat on their bones for the family, and food is hard enough to come by as it is. For several weeks, Bach uploaded different videos of different dogs and him pretending to rescue them. His video channel started gaining some traction. When he was playing out the scene, he really did feel like he was saving them. He plays pretend anyway, but this time the puppies are in on the game. Unfortunately, when many of the puppies became old enough, they were also eaten. People would ask what happened to those puppies, and Bach would just lie to make the people feel better. It's better to spare their feelings. He couldn't tell them that his family ate those puppies only a few weeks later because that would defeat the purpose of the rescue. Bach's friends got in on his projects, and they all made accounts and shared in the videos. It was starting to become fun. Before Bach knew it, things were amped up a notch. His older friend, the one who always seemed like the leader of the group, told Bach and the other friend that finding the puppies was not enough. It was too easy. He said that people claim they don't like watching animals suffer, but the victory is made more sweet if the animal suffered more. Off camera, Bach watched as his two friends would do horrible things to the dogs from their parents' farms, or dogs that they would find as strays. They would beat them over the head or cut them, and Bach felt the unsettling nerve of sadness when he would hear the dogs cry out in pain, unable to get away. When he edited his videos and said that somebody horrible did these things to the dogs, and that he was so sorry that there were people like this, he felt a small tinge of guilt. The people in the comments would pray. They would praise Bach and tell him how wonderful he was, how good of a person that he was, and how the angel sent him from on high to help rescue these dogs. And Bach would really try to save them after, but only as far as he could with the little that he had. Some of them were too far gone in their injuries that his friends had caused on them. Bach had learned to sew up wounds, but many of the dogs that his friends beat up needed way more than this, as they had broken bones and internal bleeding. Some of the injured dogs that recovered made it only to be killed later for food. Bach's friends settled down a bit because their parents were upset that they were tainting their livestock. They were only allowed to take out the animals that were already sick or too thin or not good enough for human consumption. Bach would show videos of him feeding the dogs and trying to rehabilitate them. His faithful viewers would eat this up. His friends also helped by making some of their other accounts so that they could comment on each other's videos and encourage their friends. "Good job saving that dog," said one of his friends who had been the one who kicked the dog's skull in. The video that had been shown later of the dog recovering had actually been an earlier video that the boys had taken of the dog way before that they inflicted injury upon the poor animal. After a while, Bach even managed to get some donations for his videos and made $300 in a matter of weeks. He told his friends how to set up their accounts to do this, and they started making money as well. Soon, the money started to be worth the pain that the dogs had to sustain. With the money, Bach felt like a man. He would actually go out and buy other resources for his family, like proper clothes and shoes. His father was very proud and encouraged him to go to the market and buy even more dogs. If they could buy extra, they could start even selling their meat. 1 year later, Bach went to the forest once again with a young brown dog in tow who was crying the whole way. He planned to make this video himself because the dog already looked sickly and sad. He made up a new story, tied the dog to a tree, and made the collar a bit tight. He would caption it, "Somebody left this poor dog to die, starving, alone, afraid." He would explain how heartless people were to leave a dog like this where they thought nobody would find him. Good thing Bach came along. It was starting to get a bit dark. Bach was 15 now, and he recalled over the past year how many dogs that he played pretend rescue with and how many he failed to rescue when he tried to pretend rescue. His friends sometimes would inflict so much damage to the poor animals that they would die before Bach even got the chance to make the video. He still made money off those videos because he would just title them, "Evil people killed this dog, somebody hit him in the head." His friends didn't care one bit and usually laughed as they were inflicting pain on the puppies. Bach didn't enjoy doing it, but a few times he jumped in to make the dog cry, or to wound the dog, or even to be the director to show his friends what part of the dog they should injure next. His mind felt very unclean afterwards. He didn't think eating dogs was necessarily bad, but he didn't like making them suffer, and he took joy and pride in legitimately trying to save them afterwards and give them a good life right before they were eaten or killed. He set up his camera and filmed the video, and then took water from out of his bag and drank. Something rustled in the distance deep in the forest ahead of him. Strange. The trees rustled again, and Bach thought it might have been some kind of snake. Oh, wouldn't that be a great video? They've done a few like that in the past, but not any recent ones. Maybe he could do one where the dog saves him from the snake. These dogs weren't loyal enough. He tried to go deeper into the forest to explore what was making the noise. But as he went closer to the noise, the source of the noise seemed to be getting closer to him. And the closer it came to him, the much louder it got. Bach had a sick feeling in the pit of his stomach and backed out quickly, ran a few paces away from the dog who was still tied up at the tree, hoping that whatever it was would grab the dog instead. And then Bach quickly relaxed after a moment of shock. Before him jumped out the prettiest dog he's ever seen. It looked like a German shepherd or some type of wolf dog, but it was pure white and had blue eyes. Its fur was long and silky, and its tongue was out in a smile. Bach relaxed. "Was that you making all that noise?" Bach asked. The dog came up to him and started licking his face. The dog was so beautiful, it didn't make sense to eat a dog like this. He was afraid to take it home, but he was convinced that this dog would be worth a lot of money, or at the very least his parents would let him keep this one as a prize. He brought the brown dog home along with a new white dog and told his parents what happened. His father didn't agree with keeping the dog as a pet. After all, they were still very tight on money. They barely had any. And this dog was going to be another mouth to feed. It didn't make sense. Bach said that they would hunt their own food together, he and his new dog, or he would sacrifice some of his food. Bach's father thought that would be useless and forbade his son from putting a dog's life above his own. As days went by, the white dog became a member of the family. Well, not really, but it was considered off limits for eating. After all, Bach had made a considerable amount of money over the year with his big rescue videos. The least his parents could do was show appreciation by letting him keep one dog. And since he's making a little money, he can use his own money to buy food. Bach named the white dog Wolfie. Wolfie was large, much larger than all the other dogs, and at first when Bach's father saw the dog, he thought it was probably just as skinny as most of the other dogs, with its really fluffy coat making up most of its mass. His father also found it very odd that the dog was so fluffy, being in such a hot climate. But when he felt the dog's body, he was even more surprised to feel the hulking muscle under the animal. It was the healthiest dog he'd ever seen. Maybe somebody had paid a lot of money for this dog and lost it recently. Maybe they would find posters of the person looking for the animal, and they would get some kind of reward. But his family would realize that that was not the case, and nobody claimed the dog, nor had there been any sign of anyone looking for the dog. Very strange for a pure white, wolf-like dog with blue eyes. Bach would play with Wolfie for a few days before he had to go back to his pretend rescue videos. Wolfie refused to stay home and would go with Bach. That's okay. Bach enjoyed the company. As Bach filmed, it's as though Wolfie knew to stay out of the shot, and sometimes would go off somewhere to probably hunt until his new friend was finished, and then Wolfie would walk back home with Bach. Bach had even been worried that when his friends came around and would kick and inflict pain and wounds on other dogs, as they would usually do when they're making their videos, that Wolfie would be offended. But he wasn't. The huge, fluffy, white, wolf-like dog would just sit there and seem to smile with his tongue sticking out, just panting like a happy puppy. not the least bit bothered that another member of his kind was being butchered in front of him. Wolfie was a trooper. As much as Bach considered Wolfie a pet, his mother and father would not let him sleep with the dog. As a matter of fact, the mother had a bad superstitious feeling about the wolf-like canine. "There is no way that dog is coming inside this house," Bach's mother would say. And Wolfie would always stay outside, sleep outside, and do his business outside. He was strictly an outside dog. Bach had joked with his superstitious mother about eating Wolfie. He asked her if she wondered what Wolfie would taste like, to which she had replied, much to Bach's shock, "You couldn't get me to eat that dog if you tried. That one is too spooky." "You mean pretty?" asked Bach. "No, my son, spooky." That was the last of that conversation. Wolfie was a great dog, and several times had chased people off the property that would try to steal the dogs that Bach's mother and father were trying to raise. He was a fantastic guard dog and an even greater companion. One strange morning, when Buck's father was going out to prepare another dog for that night's supper, he heard a very low growling noise. As he made his way around the few steps leading away from the little house, he saw Wolfie, the white dog's back to him, hackles raised and looking off into the distance. "Oi, Wolfie," Buck's father called out, a little more twang in his accent. Wolfie didn't even register that someone had called him. He knows the dog wasn't deaf, because when they would call him, Wolfie would come running no matter how far away he was. The father called him again and then slowly walked in front of him, hoping to get the dog's attention. Chills ran up the father's spine. It's as if the dog was looking straight through him, as if he wasn't even standing there in front of the dog. Wolfie just kept growling at whatever it was he was seeing, apparently able to still see it even though Bach's father was standing right in front of him. Was the dog sleepwalking? Weird. Its eyes were open, thought Bach's father. Bach's father eerily looked behind him momentarily to see if he could get an idea of what the dog could have been looking at. Maybe it was some spirit or something. And when he turned back around, that spine-tingling sensation returned full force, because now Wolfie was looking right at him and growling. "Wolfie?" he asked warily, somewhat trying to calm the dog down. The man wasn't stupid. He knew this dog could easily kill him if it wanted to. God darn it, the axe was on the step at the house. He never even thought to bring it because, well, he never needed to. He always washed up first and then went back to the little shack area behind the house to slaughter the dogs. He would simply just grab the axe on his way back. This man, as much as he didn't really like keeping dogs as pets, actually grew to like Wolfie. He never thought for 1 second that the dog would be violent. He forgot also that the dog had the potential to be violent. He knows working with dogs that sometimes they can snap out of fear. Not all of them were submissive, but he was a man who had tools that could crack a dog's skull in just one swipe. He's done it before to submit dogs. However, most of the dogs that he dealt with were also much smaller. Much of them were half the size of Wolfie and barely had any muscle. Now seeing this hulking predator, its beautiful white fur swaying in the wind and his teeth, the biggest this man has ever seen in a dog or any animal, glistening in preparation to be bathed in the blood of whatever it would kill next. Cold, icy blue eyes staring at him with a penetrating hatred. Bach's father felt fear. Raw, primitive fear. In the deep recesses of his subconscious, Bach's father could hear the livestock of dogs in the pen only a few feet away, barking, howling, and panicking. What on earth was going on? Bach's father was afraid to move. He held his hands up so slowly the movement was almost imperceptible. With a shuddering breath, he said, "Wolfie, easy." The tone of Wolfie's growl became lower, if at all that was possible, or maybe time was just slowing down. Then it came to a head. Wolfie barked loudly and then skipped off towards the water container to drink, wagging his tail. He came over to the frightened man, licked his fingers, and then ran off to play. In tandem with the sudden change of mood, the dogs in the pen also stopped barking and lay down and continued their actions they were doing before as if none of that had just happened. What the hell? Understandably, Bach's father felt very uneasy with Wolfie around for the rest of the day. When Bach came home, Wolfie was by his side. Bach's dad told his son what had happened, and Bach could not believe it. The next morning, Bach's dad was armed with a knife this time as soon as he stepped out the door. Again, Wolfie was in the same position, only this time lying on the ground outside the front of the house in a sphinx position, looking off into the distance. "Wolfie?" the father called out, and immediately, Wolfie turned around to look at him with a closed mouth and annoyed look. His tongue fell out of his mouth in a smile, and he got up and wagged his tail, then pranced towards the front of the house in front of Bach's father, awaiting some sort of command. Nothing out of the ordinary? A month later, everything was normal, just as it had been. Wolfie once again went out with Bach to take another dog to be pretend rescued. But this day was a bit different than the rest. Bach had brought with him a little black dog, skinny and shivering, and purposely tied its neck into a tire, enough so the dog would be scared, but not enough to injure it. The dog tried to wiggle out of Bach's trap and caused its neck to be cut into by the wire. "Aye!" Bach exclaimed. Bach went to calm the dog down, and when he backed up to set up the camera again, he felt something wet on the back of his neck. When Bach turned, his eyes became level with a face full of sharp teeth and icy blue eyes staring dead into his. Bach gasped and fell away from Wolfie, who was glaring at him. No sounds were coming out of Wolfie, as the young boy would expect them to. Bach momentarily worried if he lost his hearing, because Wolfie looked as though he should have been growling. All his teeth were completely bared, like those aggressive wolves you see on TV right before they kill someone or fight. Bach's heart beat out of his chest. Wolfie has never been aggressive towards him. Did he do something wrong? I'm sorry, Wolfie, Bach said, innocently, thinking that maybe when he backed up into Wolfie it pissed him off. Bach was afraid to stand up, thinking that Wolfie would see it as a threat, but he also didn't want to stay in a compromising position on his butt in case Wolfie were to attack. Bach looked over to his right towards the little black dog who was still tied up to the tree. As soon as Bach looked at the little dog looked away. Then Bach heard the growling. It's as if Wolfie had been trying to get his attention, but Wolfie wasn't growling at anything except for Bach. Bach turned his head to the right again to look back at the little black dog, and it's as though the little black dog didn't even notice Wolfie's presence. Whenever the little black dog would look in Wolfie's direction, his head would tilt as though he heard something, but then would look back somewhere else and just lay down in despondent anticipation for what this crazy human was going to do to him now. It was peculiar behavior. Wolfie, it's me," said Bach. I'll let him go if you want," Bach said, meaning the little black dog. As soon as Bach sat up slowly, Wolfie snarled and lunged towards him, only stopping a few feet in front of the boy, who was now right up against the tree the little black dog was tied up to. Wolfie was still only inches from Bach's face, teeth bared and a monstrous grin. Bach's heart raced in total terror. What was happening to his friend? In that moment, he really wondered if Wolfie would really kill him, and then a horrible realization hit the 15-year-old boy. Wolfie could kill him if he wanted to. Wolfie looked over to the black dog and then at Bach. Bach understood. Immediately, Bach got his clippers and freed the little black dog. "See? He's okay, Wolfie. He's okay." Wolfie tilted his head and stopped growling. Bach was relieved. Wolfie clamped his jaws around the little black dog and started ripping the flesh from its bones. The little black dog cried so loudly, the screams seemed to echo throughout the entire forest. Bach screamed too, totally shocked as to what was going on. He watched in total horror as the large white canine slowly tore each of the little black dog's limbs off from its squealing body. The tail was the last to go. Wolfie then sat in front of the poor little dog, its head being the only thing attached, and looked into its eyes as it was crying and whimpering. As it bled out onto the ground, its whimpers getting quieter. Run, 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 run was all Bach's instincts were telling him to do, but his instincts were also telling him that Wolfie would catch up to him in a second. Wolfie did not even eat any part of that little dog. The white dog's face was bathed in blood. The entirety of his front paws were totally red, and the dog looked like something that just stepped out of the pools of hell. Wolfie looked at Bach at a side glance, as if wondering why the human was staring at him, staring at this little dog. All Bach could do was stare in horror back at who he thought was his pet. Then a white tail wagged. Wolfie was himself again, jumping and running back and forth in that silly dog way, as if he hadn't just been staring into the eyes of the dying little dog, as though it pleased him to watch the life leave the little animal. Wolfie then ran into the trees and disappeared for about 5 minutes. Bach sat on the ground as still as possible the whole time, surveying the trees around him and wondering which one he could climb up that the dog could not follow him. He then made the primal decision to run as fast as he could back home. Home was only 5 minutes away, but it felt like an eternity as the young boy's muscles ached and burned, hammering the floor with each of his footfalls. Bach, after running for what seemed like a long time, heard a loud galloping noise behind him, trees being pushed aside by something much bigger than any animal he knew in existence. Before he could reach home, he slipped and fell in the dirt and immediately curled into a fetal position, eyes closed tightly, not wanting to see what was ready to issue his death sentence. Bach cried like a baby and felt something wet on his leg. Feeling as though he was being eaten, he screamed in dread, and then he realized that Wolfie was licking him. Bach opened his eyes, and Wolfie was nice and clean and looked concerned. Bach's father came out and threw rocks at Wolfie. Wolfie never even whimpered, just quickly leapt out of the way as though he had been used to people throwing things at him. He growled at the boy's father and momentarily stood in front of Bach as if to protect him. "No! You get out of here, you demon!" Bach's father screamed. Before Bach's father could throw another rock, Wolfie growled, ears pinned to the back of his neck, and then took off into the forest running. Bach told his parents what happened, and his parents told him that he could no longer have that dog, and that he was going to have to deal with the fact that if that dog came back around, Bach's father would kill him. Bach was afraid of Wolfie, but he also felt guilty. Wolfie was his friend. Or was that dog using him? There is no explanation that Bach could come up with as to why Wolfie did what he did. He had explained to his parents what Wolfie did to the black lab mixed dog in the forest. Since they were superstitious, they were convinced that that dog was from hell. 2 nights later, Bach heard a noise outside. His bed was only a few feet from the window, and he slung his feet over to get up and look outside. Only having 1 floor of his poor house, he could see everything eye level. The moon was out tonight in all its fullness and was reflecting off the wet ground. It had rained only moments ago, and Bach could see something, the silhouette of a creature walking slowly towards the house. It had pointy ears and had a lot of fur, and all he could see on that black silhouette was the moon reflecting off its back. Its face and the rest of it was bathed in darkness. It seemed to be looking right at Bach through his window, even though the curtains were barely peeled so he could see outside, and even though Bach couldn't see its eyes. Bach gasped. He could feel a horrific sensation coursing through his veins. That was Wolfie. Wolfie walked past the dog pen. Usually the dogs, if they saw anything, any animal that walked by, anything that was living that moved, they would make a big fuss. They were good as food, but also good alarm systems for the house, so that Bach's parents could know if anything or anyone was on their property. As Wolfie's ghostly figure seemed to float by, the dogs did nothing. It looked as though they didn't even see Wolfie at all. Wolfie walked past them and into the light that was cast just outside of Bach's window. The lights from Bach's room were off, so Wolfie shouldn't be able to see him. Or could he, being that he was a hunter? But now, the white monster was looking up at him with his icy blue eyes, the pupils so small, illuminated by the light, they were almost invisible on the background of blue. Bach got up and ran into his parents' bed. Bach's father tried to push him out, but when his son told him what was going on, he quickly got up, grabbed his machete, and looked out of Bach's window. There he saw Wolfie sitting in the same position he had been when Bach left him, just staring up into Bach's window. The father angrily went outside like he had a vendetta against this dog, and when he went around to the outside of Bach's window, the dog was gone. From the front door, Bach's room, or his window, was only about 5 feet to the right. Walking up to their tiny little house, that is all you would see. The front door, and several feet to the right, Bach's window. Very close to the front door. Very strange. The father told Bach the dog had left. The mother was beside Bach, still in his room, holding her son in fear. Bach looked outside the window to confirm that... Wait. At first, Bach was expecting Wolfie to be hiding. When Bach saw his father standing out there with a machete telling him that Wolfie ran away to go hide, Bach did a double take. Because that made no sense. If that was the case, then why did he still see Wolfie sitting in that same position, still looking up at him through the window? Wolfie was now out there, with his father only a few feet away. No. Dad, run! He's still there! Bach shouted. But it's as if Bach's father, for some reason, could not see Wolfie, which was impossible. There were 2 lights at the front of their house. One by the front door, a very dim porch light, and the other one right by Bach's window, where it would have been very easy to see a very large white dog bathed in light sitting there. But to Bach's father, there was just an empty pool of light. Bach's mom and he were screaming as they saw Wolfie turn to face the father, then get up slowly and trot towards him. Bach's father instinctively ran inside and closed the door, or rather makeshift door, which was made of thin pieces of wood. The father was confused because he said he had not seen Wolfie since he stepped foot outside. This was an occurrence every night, and Bach's parents were convinced that they were cursed. The white wolf dog would come from out of the darkness every night and sit in front of Bach's window and stare up at it, hoping to see Bach come out. Thank goodness the window was a few feet off the ground, but the harrowing realization hit Bach and his parents that if that large dog were to stand up on its hind legs, its paws could very well reach the windowsill, and its head would be able to look inside, and it would even be possible for it to jump up and get inside. Heaven knows what would happen then. Bach's window was only barricaded with makeshift horizontal 1/2 inch thick blinds. Bach over time felt more trepidation that somehow the ghostly white dog would find his way inside. One night, Bach had a nightmare that his room door was being scratched down. The dream was more terrifying because it was in the daytime. Wolfie, now, would only appear at night, but it didn't stop his family from being ill at ease. Bach woke from his nightmare and found that his door was closed. It was nighttime. There was no scratching. No doubt the eerie white dog was by this time still outside waiting for God knows what out his window. Bach had stopped doing his fake rescue videos a long while ago. He didn't trust that Wolfie would not attack him. He didn't like being alone, and things were made worse when he heard that his 2 friends had been mauled by some random animal. One was dead, and the lead boy, who had thought it fun to maim dogs and injure them, was alive but horribly disfigured. Apparently, he had been found with his hands and feet chewed off, as well as his face, with the exception of one of his eyes. Bach was certain it had been Wolfie. Before going back to sleep, Bach wanted to check outside. He turned to the left to look out his window, the only window in his room, and sighed in anticipation to see the horror once again outside. At this point, he would be more terrified if he looked down and did not see Wolfie in that pool of light. He screamed. Hanging halfway inside his room, through the window staring at him, was the huge white dog. Bach fell out of his bed and screamed so loud he felt his voice pop and tasted his own blood. The back of Wolfie's legs were perched on the sill now, his front paws just chilling out, dangling on the wall inside Bach's room. How long had the thing been there? It could have easily just jumped down inside and killed him. In a swift motion, Wolfie leapt onto the bed, and Bach slammed open the door to his bedroom and then slammed it shut. There was no latch to shut it outside, so he used the table to barricade the door and lock Wolfie in. Bach was sobbing with his back to the door. He wanted to go and get his parents and actually wondered why they had not been woken up by his screams. He ran into their room and closed the door behind him and leapt into their bed. His dad gasped in fright as Bach landed on his stomach. "Sorry, Dad. Wolfie's in the house." Bach slipped in the bed, and when he tried to right himself, that's when he realized that the bed was full of a cold, wet liquid. That sighing noise that he thought was his dad had actually been the squeaky noise of the liquid as he moved upon the bed. Bach was confused and turned on the lamp next to the bed and froze. It was covered in blood and viscera. Intestines and the smell of bile and shit at once hit Bach's nose. His mind could not process what he was seeing, because on the pillows was the heads of his mom and dad. Where their bodies were supposed to be beneath them was just blood and guts and minced meat. It's as if they had been sleeping and something large ate all their bodies and chewed it up and spat it out and just left the heads like some sick joke. From here, Bach could hear his room door explode, the sound of wood clattering loudly to the ground. Had Ghost killed his parents? The way he did that dog in the forest? Bach pulled the dresser in front of his parents' door. He turned it sideways so its length matched the doorway. If anything broke the door, it would have to get through that dresser. Bach had no idea how he found the strength to even do that. Maybe it was leverage, or maybe it was the adrenaline. Even though Bach was 15, he was quite scrawny for his age. You could hear the scratching at the door on the other side of his parents' room. Good thing there were no windows in his parents' room. The floor of his parents' room were made out of tied together long branches. Under that was just raw dirt. The floor raised from that dirt about 2 inches. The thought crossed Bach's mind. The only way Wolfie could get in here was if he dug his way in or somehow managed to move the dresser. Bach was beyond terrified, as he was convinced Wolfie was no ordinary creature. Why couldn't his father see him that one time? Why is it no other animals registered Wolfie's presence? At once he could hear Wolfie biting the wood off the door. Bach yelled out in pure childlike desperation, "What do you want?" Wolfie seemed to stop for a second, as if contemplating, and then continued tearing the door apart with even more vigor than before, as if the boy had just insulted him by asking such a question. Bach looked around, and there was only a closet in the wall with a flimsy accordion door that he could use to hide, but a predator like Wolfie would have such a strong nose that it wouldn't do any good hiding in there. Plus, it wasn't like it was sealed off, and it would be so easy for Wolfie to just push his face inside. The only other thing Bach could do was hide in something more sturdy, the dresser against the door. The dresser was so thick and heavy that, Wolfie would have a hard time biting into it unless, of course, he had super strength. The handles were also on the inside of the dresser so that Bach could hold the drawers closed from inside. Through the slit where the dresser and doorway met, Bach could see the shadow of Wolfie's nose and hear him sniffing. He then could hear the pitter-patter of other dog feet on the wooden floor outside and the rest of the living space. Were there more of him? They sounded huge. Bach opened the largest drawer and folded himself in. Before he did, he tried to break off the handles from outside. They were very hard to break, so he concentrated on the drawer that he was going to be in. In between the drawers, the material was just as thick. There were latches to hold them closed. Bach found it funny, but the most well-made and expensive thing that they had in their poor home was this dresser that was now probably going to be responsible for saving his life, or becoming his coffin. Bach broke off the handle on the outside of the drawer he'd be hiding in by kicking it several times. This riled up the predators outside, which no longer sounded like dogs. There was hissing and meowing and growling. The handles of the inside of the drawer were still held fast, and Bach went inside. The dresser was so heavy his weight didn't matter. He felt a smash as Wolfie and his company tried to push the dresser inward. And eventually, The dresser tilted forward with all of their weight. Bach felt relief, but then this relief turned to a terrifying realization that he would be trapped by the weight of the dresser, unable to push the drawer open, and he would possibly eventually run out of air. Well, that's exactly what happened. The dresser fell, Bach's head connected to the inner part of the dresser from the impact, and he passed out. It was dark when Bach woke up. He tried stretching involuntarily and was stopped by the barriers of the interior of the dresser he had sought shelter in. He could hear something outside, a gnawing noise. The wolves were still out there. Bach would try out of desperation to push as hard as he could to see if he could budge the dresser from inside the drawer just to get a glimpse, but to no avail. Wolfie and whatever else was out there could not get inside. But they were trying, and Bach could not get out. Over time, he found that it got harder to breathe. Bach panicked and screamed, hyperventilated and kicked, using up the little bit of oxygen he had left. And then, everything went black. When Bach woke up, his body felt tight and stiff, and he couldn't see. He could feel something wet slide across his eyes, and with terror, he just knew it was Wolfie. He tried to open his eyes, and when he opened his mouth to scream, understanding fully that this was when he would die, the wet thing went inside of his mouth. Other warm, soft bodies surrounded his, and he felt comfort, peace, acceptance. Was he alive? No. Yes. He felt pain, hunger, the need to pee, and the relief of doing it. He felt someone cleaning him up as he did. Everything felt ethereal. Time also felt very awkward, as though he was at a standstill but moving forward very quickly as well. Before long, it would seem like hours or days or maybe longer, he finally opened his eyes and everything was blurry. In time, his eyes adjusted, and what he saw before him made him afraid. It wasn't over. There was the face of the white dog with teeth clamping over his neck and hauling him into the air. He couldn't scream if he wanted to. It took Bach a while to realize that he wasn't choking. He was gently placed in a soft bed of leaves next to what sounded and felt like and looked like swarming little white puppies, similar to the ones that he used in his first video. However, these puppies were huge. The first time he looked down at his hands, he was totally floored when he realized that they were not his. He was a puppy himself, or at least he was in the body of one, or looking through the eyes of one. And the white dog he had seen only moments before was their mother. His mother. A short-haired, cream-colored mutt. She had been cleaning him and the other puppies. Was everything that he just experienced a dream, or was this a dream? Who was he? Had he been human, or had he been here the whole time? No, the experience was too real. As time went by, Bach came to the conclusion that he had been reincarnated. Is he supposed to have his memories, or is he having an out-of-body experience? Months went by, and after a while, the memory of Bach's previous life faded away until he no longer even remembered who he was or who he had been. As far as he was concerned, he was a cute little white mutt, a pup who was happy to be with his family, part of his pack. He loved his brothers and sisters and played with them every day until their mother taught them how to hunt on their own. In the corner of his eye, only sometimes on their outings, he could have sworn he saw a very shaggy wolf-like white dog running through his periphery. But every time the young pup would look in that direction, there would be nothing there. Bach the pup lived a very happy life. He made his first kill, a fat lizard that he held up high so that his brothers and sisters wouldn't take it from him and claim it as their own. He brought it back to his mother, who ate half of it and left the rest for him to eat. She was proud of him and licked his face, having faith that he would become a great hunter someday. On one beautifully sun-bathed morning, Bach went out to play with one of his sisters, the one he had been the closest with, and felt a horrible pain on his back. The sister cried out in concern for him. When Bach looked up, he saw something familiar. It was a human face. Why was this familiar? Of all the 7 months he'd been a puppy, he's never seen a human being. He's always been surrounded by other families of dogs and foliage. He looked down and saw his sister barking bravely at the human, who laughed and used a metal stick it was holding in his hand to hit her across her head. Bach howled in agony, watching his sister lying on the floor, bleeding from her little head. Her feet were twitching and her eyes were still open. She was hemorrhaging. They took her back feet, held her in the air, and then slammed her back down on the ground several times until she was no longer breathing. Bach screamed in agony and anger. He could hear his mother crying out as well as his other siblings. And then he blacked out when something forcefully hit him from behind. When Bach woke up, he woke up to his mother's screams. As he opened his eyes, trying hard to focus, he could see that he was enclosed in an area with a whole bunch of other dogs he's never seen before. Some of them he had, including some of his siblings. Not all of them were here, and he hoped the others got away. He couldn't see his sister, who these humans killed only moments ago, but his mother was strung up by her back legs over a pot of boiling water. She cried in agony, feeling the heat hit her face and blinding her. Bach quickly felt a horrible sensation of deja vu. He felt at some point that he had been a human, but his kind were the ones doing this to the dogs. As his mother was lowered into the boiling water, she thrashed and screamed in pain as the water mercilessly bit into her skin with heat way too high to be tolerable for any living thing. The screaming. Oh, her screaming. Bach's entire body was trembling and sick with fear. His head still felt hazy from the impact of the blunt object the humans had used to hit him. They picked up 3 of his siblings and unceremoniously just threw them into the huge pot of boiling water. They all jumped around in the pot and screamed in agony. The only thing that they could see and sense was pain and terror. It was hard for Bach to process what was happening. The humans took the bodies, the mother and his siblings, curled up and lifeless, out of the pot after a few minutes with these metal instruments, and then placed them into another container filled with water. Then the humans bent down, laughing and talking, tearing the fur that was now easy to come off due to the boiling water right off of his family. Bach felt sick and hopeless. The other dogs beside him were biting and pawing at the pen, trying to dig and find a way to get out. There were spikes at the bottom of the fence, so if they did dig under, there was no way for them to go any further without hurting themselves. One dog climbed over the fence and was almost all the way over, right about to escape. A human took his time and walked over and hit the poor dog with the edge of the machete right on the poor dog's skull. The dog's feet went stiff all of a sudden, and he fell over onto his back off the fence, kicking wildly, as his body had no idea how to react to the sudden impact by the blade. Everything seemed like a dream, or a nightmare. Bach felt as though he was half asleep, and so he didn't feel the arms of a human who picked him up along with another dog and carried him over to a fresh pot of boiling water. It was hard for him to notice anything else, with the exception of one thing that he caught in his periphery, just like he had when he was younger. This time, when he looked, he could see it clearly, the thing that had always been eluding his sight before. In the distance was a large white wolf-like dog with blue eyes, standing on all fours, his head lowered, hackles up, growling at the humans as they carried Bach over to the pot. That white dog just stared as though he had the same hatred Bach now felt for the humans who killed his mother. Weirdly enough, the humans, nor the dogs, nor any other living thing around in the environment reacted to the dog's presence. The last thing Bach heard before being submerged into the bubbling liquid was a man's voice, a very familiar one at that. from the deep recesses of his mind, told Bach that he probably knew who it was, but just couldn't put it together. That man's voice was calling out from where the dog was. The voice felt like it wasn't a part of what was going on, as though the dog and the voice were from some different realm. The dog ignored the voice, and then looked straight at Bach. This was the last thing Bach ever saw for a very long time. Possibly for the last time.